It all began with laughter. Just like always, the wrong plans do not start with fear, they start with smiles. It was late. Warm night air slipping through half-open windows. They sat close, scattered on couches, pizza boxes open, and someone said, "Let's plan our upcoming vacations, along with an adventure, maybe a long drive." They talked about beaches, hills, and then someone whispered the words they shouldn't have. "What about the old church? The one everyone says is abandoned?" Laughter again. A dare. A shrug. The plan was sealed not with caution, but with jokes. But that night, when sleep finally came, each of them dreamed. Eli dreamed of bells that would not stop ringing. Matt saw faces in the forest that had no eyes. Mark dreamed of carrying something heavy that whispered his name. Dan woke choking from a dream of his parents calling from the dark. None of them told the others. Not then, because wrong plans always feel right at the beginning. On the morning of vacation, they left. The sky was clear, the music was loud, the car was heavy with snacks and half-serious excitement. Halfway there, on the main road, a tire exploded. The car jolted sideways, skidding to a stop. They cursed, laughed nervously, stepped out. But fortune, it seemed, was still with them. A rest stop sat a little ahead. They rolled the car in, sweating, and had the tire replaced, keeping the spare tire for their journey ahead. 2 hours lost, already late, already behind the plan. But they didn't turn back. They never do, in stories like this. They only pressed forward toward the dirt road no one should take. The dirt road, uneven, broken. No sign of recent use, not a single tire mark. A county sign at the turnoff, no emergency access, no network beyond 3 miles, hazardous area. Someone had scrawled underneath, "Very dark, very unwanted, and too many of them." Nobody wanted to be the one to say no. They kept driving. The car rattled. Dust rose and clung to the windows. Branches hung too low. Scratching, scraping. The silence became louder than music. Their gossip fell away. Jokes dried in their mouths. Each of them leaned forward, eyes on the road, shoulders tight, as though the forest leaned closer, listening. Then, the forest moved. Crows erupted from the branches above, wings black as holes, flapping against each other. Bats spiraled up from hollows in trees. The sky itself turned alive with panic. The noise was unbearable, a storm of wings and shrieks. The forest pressed heavier. The air thickened like water. Each breath dragged into lungs as if stolen. The car's headlights caught glimpses between trees, not paths, but shadows that looked like paths. Not safe, not made for men. They drove on, surrounded, buried in a weight they didn't yet understand. 3 miles in, the car stopped dead. A thick branch lay across the road. "It looks placed," Mark said. They pulled it aside. The bark felt warm, like it had been held by someone moments before. When they got back in, the air inside the car felt thicker. Breathing took effort. No one said it out loud. The smell hit the all. Rot. Thick, wet, clinging. It pressed into their hair, their clothes, their mouths. They gagged. Eli rolled down her window, then shut it fast. Outside was worse. A heaviness came with it. Shoulders bowed as if each carried a sack of stone. Their thoughts slowed, like wading through mud. The silence of the forest wasn't silence at all. It was humming, vibrating. A note held too long. And each of them thought of stories, of other people, the unlucky who stepped into haunted places and never returned. They realized then, this was what those people must have felt. The strangeness, the weight, the certainty that something waited just beyond sight. Patient. Hungry. Another tire. Another shudder. They stopped. The rim was bent, the rubber shredded, no nail, no rock. It was as if the wheel had been crushed. A sign, a warning, or a promise. The forest air grew heavier still. Not weather, not natural. A pressure of something alive, something unseen, settling over them. And though no wind blew, they all felt it. The car rocking slightly, as if something unseen brushed past it and whispered to the bolts holding it together. They replaced it with spare tire, with just half an hour left before nightfall, as if that place wanted this. They walked hand in hand, closer now, flashlight beams trembling. Then, a voice. Footsteps in the gravel, a whisper just behind the church's side wall. Dan froze, eyes wide. "I see them," he whispered. "My parents." His parents. Dead since he was 15. Shadows moved near the small house beside the church. Two figures, dim, pale, just far enough to make doubt. Dan broke free. He ran. Mark shouted, lunged after him. The shadows slipped into the jungle's mouth. Dan followed. Mark followed Dan. But the jungle swallowed them whole. And Eli and Matt were left alone at the edge, hearing only the rustling of something larger, moving, waiting. Inside. Eli and Matt ran back. They grabbed the torch, the wrench, something to hold. When they turned again, the screams. Not from the jungle, from the church itself. They froze. The door had a rusted lock, still clinging to its bolt, half closed, not truly locked. The screams grew sharper. Voices they knew, voices of their friends, calling from inside. Together, they forced it open. The hinges screamed louder than the voices, and the dark inside breathed cold over their faces. Still, they stepped in. Inside, the flashlights cut thin tunnels of light. Dust hung like smoke. Old wooden benches leaned at wrong angles. Shards of colored glass glittered like teeth. At the far end, a family of 3, father, mother, child, made of shadow. They looked straight at the boys, then unspooled like smoke and vanished. The benches toppled, one by one, closer and closer, as if something ran along them. Invisible, fast, laughing without sound. They turned to flee and froze. Mark stood in the doorway, dragging Dan by the shoulders. Dan's face was covered in mud, packed thick along his jaw and cheeks. His shirt was ripped in long, blunt tears, like by nails that were too long to be human. His eyes rolled under half-closed lids. He wasn't fully awake, but he kept screaming, "They're coming! They're coming to take me! Don't let them!" Mark's hands and face were blotched with burns, round marks like coins, as if hot fingertips had pressed and held. They ran back to the car. Doors slammed. Breaths shook. Eli at the wheel, Matt beside her, Mark holding Dan in the back. But there was another sound, a seatbelt ratcheting, metal clicking. Something unseen had sat down with them. The fabric creaked. The smell of rot thickened. Mark screamed, "Go! Go!" The engine coughed alive. The car lurched forward. But whatever rode with them did not plan to leave. The car rolled forward, slow at first, then slower, as if the road itself pulled backward. Headlights swept the bend, And there it was again, the same dead pine, with a scar in the bark like a crooked mouth, the same stone at its base, skull-shaped in the beam. They passed it once, twice, 3 times. Eli's hands ached on the wheel. Matt kept counting under his breath, lost the number, started again. A chill moved through the car in waves, not from a draft, but like a breathing thing inside with them. Each cold exhale slid across their necks, then vanished into the upholstery. The dashboard clock ticked forward, then jumped back a minute, then forward again. The second hand scraped like it was dragging nails. The engine worked too hard, too loud for the speed. The weight they'd felt before was still there, pressing down from the roof, pressing up from the floor. The forest outside didn't move like normal trees. Branches swayed to a wind they couldn't hear. The shadows beneath them leaned toward the car, as if the darkness itself wanted a better look. Left? Matt whispered. Right? Eli asked. But every turn returned them to the same bend, the same pine, the same skull stone, the same loop that would not let go. The radio snapped alive on its own. No station, only static that rose and fell like a person breathing through cloth. Under it, whispers, soft at first, then louder, then clear enough to speak their names. Eli, Mark, Dan, Matt. Dan stirred in the back seat, eyes half open. They know us, he murmured. They knew the moment we turned off the highway. Figures appeared along both ditches, not close, not far, just enough for the headlights to catch pale faces that didn't have features, and white eyes that gleamed like scratched porcelain. They stood in rows, turned their heads together when the car crawled past, and smiled with mouths too wide, too thin, too wrong. The orbs returned, small white lights drifting at hood height, parting and closing, guiding and blocking, the way a teacher moves a child's hand. Don't follow, Mark said. But wherever Eli turned, the orbs slid to meet the bumper, and the whispers on the radio said in many voices at once, this way, this way, this way. The unknown thing in the back seat shifted. The middle belt ratcheted a click tighter, as if used by a passenger none of them could see. A scent, like old flowers, rose from the fabric. Sweet. Rotting. Patient. The first step hit the roof like a dropped anvil, a deep, denting boom that bent the metal down an inch. Eli screamed. Matt flinched so hard his seatbelt locked across his chest. Dan threw both hands over his face. Mark reached up instinctively, then snatched his hand back as if the roof burned him. Another step, then another, slow, deliberate, crossing from the rear window to the windshield. Each footfall a groan of tortured metal. Long, dull claws scraped the glass in 4 parallel lines, not sharp enough to cut, but heavy enough to make the windshield bow. The dome light flipped on by itself. Office on, a finger above the button, a game with no laughter. Hot smoke smell rolled through the cabin. Mark looked at his palms, new round burns rising as if a hot hand pressed back from the other side of his skin. He rubbed them on his jeans, new ones bloomed. He bit down on a cry. Dan sat up too fast, eyes huge, staring straight at the ceiling. Not me, he hissed through his teeth. You had your turn, not me. The weight above them shifted toward the hood, and for a moment the suspension rose. Something had stepped off. Then all at once, the roof popped back up a fraction. Not fixed, just relieved. as if the car had taken a breath. They didn't look back at first, they only felt it, the running behind them. When Matt finally glanced into the rear window, he saw it, a man shape, taller than the road signs, limbs too long, knees bending wrong. It ran without sound, it ran without effort, its head tilted, curious, like a deer that recognizes a song. No face, only a pale oval where a face should be, and the suggestion of a smile that wasn't made by a mouth. "That's him," Dan said, voice smaller than a breath. "That's the priest." The long man reached out one arm, fingers unfolded like a bundle of old wires. They brushed the trunk and peeled the metal like damp paper. The bells began, clear, close. 4 chimes, pause. 3 chimes, so one long note that didn't end. The sound filling their bones until their teeth ached. Eli jammed the pedal down. The engine howled. The car fought the weight like a swimmer in a cold river. Ahead, a smear of silver through the trees. Highway lights. A different world waiting. They burst onto asphalt like breaking the surface of deep water. Street lamps, reflectors, a green sign with an exit number that made sense. The car shuddered, then finally moved like a car again. The heaviness loosened finger by finger. Eli sobbed once and didn't hide it. Matt stared forward as if he could hold the world together by not blinking. Mark kept one hand on Dan's shoulder, counting the boy's breaths out loud. At the black line where forest met highway, the long man stopped. He stood at the edge, tilted his head, and raised one long arm, like a priest offering a benediction to travelers who would never be blessed. Traffic swept between them. Headlights washed the tree line. And the figure was gone. But the inside of the car didn't feel clean. The dents were still warm under the headlight. The air still smelled faintly of burnt cloth, and flower water left too long. The dashboard clock ticked back to the correct time on its own, then refused to move at all for 1 full minute, then resumed, as if nothing had happened. They pulled into the first open gas station. Neon buzzed. The open sign flickered between letters as if deciding. Everything was bright here, too bright. The world felt loud, freezers humming, faraway tires whispering on asphalt, the kind of noises that belong to people and not to forests. Dan wouldn't get out. He stared at the window glass as if a face stared back. He breathed in shallow sips, murmuring, "Don't let them take me. Don't let them..." Mark went to the restroom to run water over his hands. The round burns brightened under the tap. The water should have been cold, but steam rose anyway, and the mirror fogged with someone else's breath. Eli bought water bottles and chocolate with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. She came back to find Matt frozen by the hood, phone in his palm, screen lit with a folder he didn't recognize. A new album. He hadn't taken any photos. He opened it. The last picture showed the 4 of them in front of the abandoned church. Eli near the door. Matt squinting into sun that never shone. Mark 1 step behind. Dan with his head turned, as if listening to something none of them could hear. A 5th figure stood behind them. Tall, face blurred like breath on glass. A long hand resting on Dan's shoulder, exactly where Dan now flinched when air moved. In the background, a bell tower rose pale against a sky that was never there, caught mid-swing. The attendant at the counter stared through the glass door. He made no move to wave them in. He simply lifted a finger, pointed toward the forest, and shook his head once, Slow, final. Then he locked the door, killed the lights, left them in the blue buzz of the canopy. Somewhere out on the highway, a single bell rang 4 times, paused, 3 times, paused, and one long note that only they could hear, that followed them back onto the road, that did not end inside their heads. They never spoke of it again, not properly, not in daylight, but in the weeks after. The story grew around them. Newspapers, old, yellowed, half-rotten, uncovered in a library basement. A family's name repeated in black ink. The priest, his wife, their child, dead. No cause of death written, only words like mysterious, unexplained, never solved. Some said the priest rang the bells himself long after he was buried. Some said his wife was seen wandering near the highway, carrying her child's toy. And some whispered the truth none of them wanted to hear, that the family had never left. Not their faces, not their hands, not their hunger. Eli dreamed of bells for months. Matt saw the blurred figure in every mirror that fogged. Mark's hands blistered when no heat was near. And Dan never again walked into a church. Not once. And if you pass that road, where the trees lean close, where the dirt is smooth as if nothing drives it, you may hear the bell. 4 chimes. Pause. 3 chimes. Pause. And one long note that never ends. The family waits, still, always, for someone to take their seat in the car beside you.